Okay. Okay, we are ready. Okay. To quickly review, just because review is great and to catch everyone up onto the same page. So last week we discussed how the prohibition to have a non-Jew do malacha on Shabbos is a rabbinic prohibition. It's created by the rabbis. We gave 3 reasons for the prohibition, which all are valid reasons, and they all play out in different scenarios. One will be that if you had non-Jews doing malacha for you and malacha was going on all around you, you would then forget it's Shabbos and come to do malacha. Reason number 2 is there is a general prohibition against speaking mundane matters on Shabbos, which is learned from the Yeshaya Hanavi. The pasuk normally referred to as the daber, that you're supposed to have unique speech on Shabbos. And if you talk about malachos, so you violate that injunction. And the third is a concept of agency, that although technically you can't make someone your agent to do a crime. So if I ask you to steal for me and you do, it's considered your crime, not my crime. But nevertheless, we consider it rabbinically that if a non-Jew would do a malacha for me, he'd be my agent. And it'd be as if I did the crime, did the malacha. The practical difference between 1 and 3 and 2 is if I ask on Friday for the malacha to be done on Shabbos, so I did not violate speaking mundanely on Shabbos because I didn't speak on Shabbos, I spoke on Friday, but my world on Shabbos is either having an agent doing malacha for me, or it is, malacha going on all around, I might come to do malacha. Whereas if I asked the non-Jew on Shabbos to do malacha on Motzei Shabbos, so then I don't have a problem with my agent. I don't have a problem that I'll come to do malacha, but I did violate speaking on Shabbos about mundane things. Okay, then what we concluded with was not only is it prohibited to ask the non-Jew to do the malacha, if the non-Jew does the malacha for the Jew, then in certain scenarios, it will be prohibited to benefit from that malacha. And the reason is it's an outgrowth of the original rabbinic decree. If I can benefit from what the non-Jew does, then I'm going to be much more tempted to ask the non-Jew to do something for me because I could benefit from what he does. If I'm not allowed to benefit from what the non-Jew does, I have no incentive to ask him to do anything. So if the non-Jew would see me in a state of needing something, and he would, on his own, do the malacha for me, and if I still couldn't benefit from it, I would never come to ask him to do anything because it wouldn't accomplish anything. But if I could benefit from when he does it for me, then I would be tempted to ask him, and that would undo the whole rabbinic takana. Okay, so that's where we left off. But we noted that there are 3 different types, levels of benefit that a non-Jew can do for a Jew. One of them is going to be a problem, one of them is going to be a dispute, and one of them is going to be lenient. And even in the one that is a problem, there are leniencies built in. So this becomes a major discussion as to what a non-Jew can do, and you can still benefit. And then once we get past here, then we can go back and say, how do you communicate it to the non-Jew? Because if you can't benefit from the action, it's irrelevant how you communicate it because you couldn't benefit from it anyways. If you could benefit, then it becomes a discussion. So how do you communicate that need? All right, so the first thing is the simplest to explain, the simplest to understand, and the most usher, which is a direct benefit. This is where you benefit directly from the malacha. This is where it is certainly prohibited to benefit from what the non-Jew does. So the 2 simplest examples of benefiting directly would be the malacha of bishul, cooking, and the malacha of, well, for lack of a better malacha, ha'avara, because I'm going to talk about light, turning on a light, lighting a fire. When a non-Jew plugs in and, yeah.
How do you spell that?
Hey, beis, ayin, resh, hey, from the word like biur chametz. Yeah. When a non-Jew plugs in an urn, okay, so that doesn't necessarily, that might be a malacha, but that's not what you're benefiting from. What you're benefiting from is by turning on the urn, the water in the urn subsequently cooks. Or put it simpler, if there is an urn that has very little water in it and it's on, and the non-Jew puts water into that urn, the non-Jew is effectively cooking, if he's doing it for you, for you. The reason we call that a direct benefit, and it's important to get this because then we can contrast it to when it's not a direct benefit. The malacha is cooking. That's what the non-Jew is doing when he puts the water in the urn, and you want cooked water. So you are getting the direct product of the malacha. If this sounds obvious, it will be helpful when we do the contrast. Just bear with me. If you are in a dark room, you need a fire lit. If the non-Jew lights the fire in the modern world, flicks on the light switch, then the non-Jew has done the malacha of making a fire, and that is what gives you the benefit of the light. That is to say, the malacha is igniting the fire, and it's the fire which provides the light. Direct benefit. Okay. Therefore, what we are saying here is, if you are coughing, looking under the weather, and a very nice, well-meaning non-Jew sees that, and on his own, without you even hinting or anything, not that it would help, he makes you a cup of tea. He heats up the water. That's going to be what we're focusing on. Or he cooks the tea bag, either way, but let's keep it simple. He heats up the water. That was done for you. You didn't ask him. You would not be allowed to drink that tea because you can't benefit from his direct act. And the logic is that if you could drink that tea, you're going to be more tempted to ask him to make you a cup of tea. Similarly, if you're sitting in a dark room and you have a book and you can't read it because it's dark, and the non-Jew sees that you are struggling and he wants to do you a favor because he's a nice guy, he flicks the light on for you, so you can't read in that room, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you have to leave the room. You just can't do anything that requires light in that room because the malacha is the lighting of the light. That is what provides the benefit, even though you didn't ask. Okay, now that's the simple case, and it's usher, yeah.
So when I show up to HOC Shabbos morning and the light is off in the women's bathroom,
Yes.
and by Torah reading, I go back and the light is on, somebody obviously turned it on for our direct benefit.
Correct. So there will be 2 or 3 different reasons why that might be okay, but we're not ready for that yet. But there are reasons why that might be okay.
Okay.
Okay, but not yet. We have to know why it might be a problem before find out why it might be okay. But there are reasons why that might be okay. Okay, now, secondary benefit. Feel free to debate on this nuance different because it seems to be that young ladies feel very happy to debate on this point. Okay. Let's say younger ladies, sorry. Okay. Let's say that you need to get into your house. Okay. There is no Eruv for the sake of making the easy case that we're going to choose. So your key is outside of the house. We're going to invent a case that you have a spare key at a neighbor's house, okay, which some people do, and you're locked out of your house. There is no Eruv. The spare key doesn't do you much good because it's not where you need it to be. If a non-Jew would be aware of your situation and would carry the key from house A to house B, the malacha of carrying is completed when the key makes it to your threshold. That is the benefit of the malacha, okay? However, you are not looking to benefit from the key being on the threshold of your house versus the other house. You want to get into your house. When you then take the key and open the door, you did not directly benefit from the malacha, or to put it in another way, the non-Jews carrying did not open your house, okay? Nuance difference. The non-Jews cooking is what you want, and that is the malacha. The non-Jews lighting the light provides the light, and that's the malacha. The non-Jews carrying makes the key be on the threshold. It's then you take that key and open the door, which provides the benefit. So therefore, the non-Jew is not providing a direct benefit, he's providing an indirect benefit. It is certainly a benefit. We are not saying it's not a benefit, but it's indirect. What means it's indirect? That the product of the malacha is not what your benefit is. Cooking, the product of the malacha is the cooked tea. In the carrying case, the product of the malacha is having a key on one threshold as opposed to another threshold. That's where the malacha ends. The fact that I now can use it to open my door is an indirect benefit of the malacha. To put it clearer, if the non-Jew would drive a bulldozer through your front door, that would be a direct benefit that you can get into your house. The malacha of destroying your door is your entrance. But here, the malacha of carrying is not your entrance, it just makes your entrance possible. In such a case, and it is not very common to find such a case, but in such a case, there is a dispute if it's permissible or not. The general way that we will paskin will be, if you don't need to rely on it, you won't. But if it is what we'd call a shas hadchak, a difficult situation, which is a flowing term depending on different people and different scenarios, we would be lenient. So, lamashal, if it was, it doesn't have to be freezing. If you had nowhere else to sleep except your house, there just were no other arrangements, and you were meaning sleeping on chairs in the shul as opposed to getting to your house, we probably would allow the non-Jew to carry the key to the threshold and then allow you to open the door. How you communicate to the non-Jew is a separate issue, which we are not discussing yet. We only want to know if there's a point to ask the non-Jew. If you were machmer on this, if you were strict, there would be no point to ask the non-Jew to carry the key because you wouldn't be able to use it anyways. But what we were saying, and that's why there's no point to ask the non-Jew to cook the tea because you can't drink it anyways. But here, if you had nowhere else to stay, we would be lenient, even though it is a secondary benefit and not in our third category, which is going to be indirect benefit. Right. So direct benefit, that's the light, the key, the tea. Secondary benefit, meaning it's a benefit, but it is secondary. It's one step removed. Apparently, a lot of people have a problem with, what do you mean I'm not benefiting from the carrying? I couldn't open the door otherwise. Okay, that's true, but that's the nuance though. The malacha is not the benefit. The malacha just makes opening the door possible, whereas the cooking of the tea, the malacha is the benefit. And again, in contrast, breaking the door down would be the malacha of destroying would be the benefit, and that wouldn't be allowed. Right now, indirect benefit. This is the most important category because this is actually where you're going to be able to do your Amir La'akum by hinting, which means that hinting will never be relevant to a direct benefit because you can't benefit anyways. In the secondary benefits, it's really hard. If you have an Eruv, carrying is the obvious case where you can have a lot of indirect benefits because the malacha will always be moving the item and then the use of the item is secondary. If you have an Eruv, you're going to wipe out a lot of the potential cases of secondary benefit. Indirect benefit is permissible. Indirect benefit is defined as where the benefit is not the product of the malacha, it's a byproduct of the malacha. Okay, so I will give you the most common example, and then we have to be able to be happy with differentiating this and a direct benefit, which also isn't a, what do you call it, doesn't always go over so well in a group of inquisitive, challenging people. But it would be like this. If my light in my bedroom is on and I want to go to sleep, so I want the light to be off. Turning a light off is a malacha of extinguishing a fire. It's also not allowed. When the light goes off, then a malacha is done. But my benefit of being able to sleep is not direct. It's not even secondary. It's an indirect benefit of the malacha. The way we like to say it would be like this. The light going off does not mean I am now asleep. The light going off simply provides an environment which is more conducive to sleep. So to contrast the two, if I can't see something, the light going on, I can now see. So the malacha, the light, is the benefit. When the tea gets cooked, it is now cooked tea. So the benefit, when the light goes off, I am not asleep. I am merely able to sleep easier. That is what we define not as the benefit of the malacha, but the byproduct or indirect benefit. In general, most things that are permissible in Amir La'akum will be the negation of something, because that's where you're going to have a indirect benefit. So to give another common example, but a lot of them are going to revolve around the same types of things. If the light is left on in your refrigerator, right? So when you open the door and discover the light is left on, so you have two problems. Problem one is closing the door. That you often can get around if your oven is good and your house is balanced. You really should be able to leave the door and it will shut itself. Okay, that's how they're supposed to work. Okay, by us, it depends how far open it is, but okay. The bigger problem is you're not going to open the fridge again later on. Okay, so if you can get a non-Jew to take that light bulb out, your benefit will be indirect because the malacha is extinguishing. On the contrary, you're actually going to get zero benefit out of that. Your refrigerator is going to be dark. You're not going to benefit from the malacha at all. It's going to allow you to open your refrigerator, but that's not the product of the malacha. Now, I understand between me and you, it's the product, but it's not the direct product. It is a very far removed product of the malacha. Those are the things that's going to be allowed. Similar, this actually happened, so it's a fun case to use. We have a mix master. What are they called? That's called mix master. A KitchenAid. Yeah, okay. It sits on the counter next to the sink and next to where we keep our towels. So this this really happened. Shabbos day, I think it was one of my kids, whatever, pulls a towel The towel has a fraying string. It latches onto the handle as he or she, I don't remember who it was, pulled the towel to wash. It turned the mixer on. Okay, so nothing's been done wrong at that point. That's beyond an accident. The technical term is misasek. You are involved in doing something permissible, taking a towel, and something beyond your control happened. The mixmaster went on. Okay, you don't even need to do tshuva. You didn't do anything wrong. Okay, it's totally mutter because you couldn't have done it if you tried. Okay, now you have a problem though. It happened to be the summer also. So Shabbos is not going to end for 9 hours. Okay, that means other than the nasty sound of in your house for 9 hours, there's a very good chance that your motor is going to get shot. Okay, so now if you can get a non-Jew to turn off the mixmaster, then you're going to have to do it with the communication is going to be correct. But what's going to be the benefit? What's the malacha? The malacha is the extinguishing of the current electrical, the extinguishing of the current that makes the mixmaster go. So the benefit is what? That my mixmaster doesn't break. Turning off the mixmaster does not equal mixmaster doesn't break. Mixmaster doesn't break is the stopping it for 9 hours of use. The malacha is not now. Okay, this is where it gets. Yes, the malacha stopped it from going 9 hours. The truth is, the malacha stopped it from going infinitely until someone would have turned it off. But the malacha is not the act of saving the mixmaster. The malacha is simply turning it off. You don't look at every time you turn off your mixmaster. I'm now, I'm now prepared to save the life of my mixmaster. No, you just turn it on and you turn it off because when you're not using it, it's off. So the direct benefit of the malacha is the thing's off. Okay, good. Now that's where it ends. The fact that it didn't break 7 hours later is an indirect benefit. That's going to be the type of thing that you're going to be able to use a non-Jew for. So in a nutshell, to sum up the three things, very broadly, when there is a positive, creative result, more times than not, it's going to be a problem because it's going to be a direct result of the malacha. When it is the removal of a problem, a removal of a bad situation, then more times than not, that's what's going to be permitted because the benefit is going to be indirect from the malacha. The middle ground is when you've done something creative, productive, but it didn't directly lead, it just led to the next step. I say generally because every case has to be analyzed on its own, but that's the general rules. We'll get to the lights maybe today, but for sure next time, if not today. Okay, we'll get to part of it today, but not really why it's mutter. There's another reason why it's really mutter. All right, now this is the big leniency that you can use in the direct benefit case. We don't need a big leniency in the indirect because that's just lenient. The big leniency in direct benefit is only usher to benefit when the non-Jew's direct benefit is a complete direct benefit, which means to say, if the direct benefit made by the non-Jew is simply an enhancement of a situation, that's not called a prohibited direct benefit. So the case that we like to use for this, to make it very simple, is you're sitting in a room. Let's imagine, okay, we can't do it. If it was during the daytime, we could do this much better. But imagine the lights were off. Okay, now, right now, if you shut the lights off, it would be pitch black in. I don't know if it would be pitch black like a basement, but it would be very dark. If the lights go on, that would be a complete direct benefit. We would go from being able to not read to be able to read. Let's say half the lights were off in the nighttime, or let's say it was the daytime and all the lights were off, but it was daytime. There was light coming in. You wanted to come and gather to daven here. Okay, so if you sat by the window, the truth is you probably wouldn't even care. If you sat in the Ezra's Nashim, it would not be the same as if it was at night, but it would be dark. If we were during the day, we could run this experiment. I tend to do this. I shut the lights in the classroom. We play with shades just to, okay. So let's say that light's on. You're sitting in the Ezra's Nashim. Can you read based on the light that's coming in from these three windows? Oh, you also have windows there too. Okay, even better. Let's pretend they're not there. Okay. If you can read, albeit with difficulty, but you can read, then the lights going on are considered a direct benefit, but an enhancing direct benefit, and that's permissible. You're allowed, the logic being, we don't assume you would violate Amira La'akum just to get a marginal benefit. So again, all the logics fit here. If the guy provided a total benefit, then if you could benefit from that total benefit, you might ask him. But if a guy provided a partial benefit, we're not concerned that you'll then ask the guy to do the partial benefit because for a partial benefit, you're not going to violate an Isser. So if you could read, albeit with difficulty, without the light, then the non-Jew can turn on the light. And not only that, but you could hint to him to turn on the light because the direct benefit is not prohibited because it is not a complete direct benefit. It is only a partial direct benefit. So if you could read now, if you couldn't read because it was too dark, then it would be a complete benefit. Don't look at this in terms of pitch black versus light. It's the level of light needed to read under ordinary circumstances. Either you can or you can't. And it might be different for different people, by the way. Yeah.
So what happens because you're kind of preparing for later? Let's say women come to mincha.
Okay, so
by then, or it's beautifully sunny in the morning and
correct.
It gets cloudy.
All right, so the moment that before the preparation thing, because that's really going to get into the next thing with other people, but this leniency is only as long as it is an indirect benefit. The moment it becomes a direct benefit, then the halacha actually changes. So it would mean that if that was the scenario that we were envisioning, and you came back for mincha or it got dark out, you could not use the light. That same, this becomes like, hey, you want to make a riddle. You know, when can it be that the single act goes from being permissible to prohibited? It's very plausible that a non-Jew does something which provides an indirect benefit that later on Shabbos becomes a direct benefit. And when it becomes a direct benefit, at that point, you would no longer be able to use the light, which means you could not read in that room. You could sit in that room because then you could argue, I could have sat in the dark. I don't know how marginally benefit is. I mean, people like sitting in the light, not in the dark, but there wouldn't be an issue to go in the room, but you couldn't read in that room. So theoretically, this room could go from, if the lights were turned on by non-Jew, although this room won't because it's a shul, it's going to have a different halacha, but just pretend it's your private house. So then theoretically, it could be that during the day, you'll be able to read by the light, and by night, you wouldn't. But again, that would be where you could have read by the light, so the electric light enhanced, but you know now that the natural light is gone, you're only benefiting, then it becomes a direct benefit and it becomes prohibited. So this would also be, the more practical case with this is if the light goes off in the place where you're trying to eat. Okay, so Friday night, you could, depending on how many candles you light, and depending how, how light you need it. So imagine a scenario where the light in your dining room went off for whatever reason. Someone backed they're back into the light switch. The light in the next room is on, and the candles are on. So the candles on your table, the candles. So combined with the two lights, you can make it by. So then you'd be able to ask a non-Jew, according to the proper ways to ask, to flick on the dining room light, because when everything's said and done, even though you could make it, it's not geschmack, it's not great, and you want it more light. But if you could only make it because the candles, And again, you'd have to know like in advance because, right? But let's say when the candles go out, then the next room light wouldn't be enough. But the candles were really making a difference and they go out, or the light in the other room goes out, and whatever the case may be. Then you would not be able to continue eating in that room in a way that you wouldn't have been able to eat because it would have been too dark, even though now the light is on, because when you got the non-Jew to turn on the light in the next room was on. Now that the light in the next room went off, or the candles went out, in retrospect, it turns out that the non-Jew is, provided a direct benefit. Now, that does not mean it was prohibited to ask him because you asked him properly, and what he did was allowed to benefit when it was allowed to benefit. But the moment the benefit changes, then it becomes usher. And this should not be confusing because it has nothing to do with your request. Even if he did it on his own, it all has to do with can you benefit or can you not benefit. Similarly, in a bathroom situation, so this becomes a tricky thing. Can people properly go to the bathroom without light or not? Now, we all know it's going to be easier with light, but if you can argue that some people, the average person, maybe it could use the bathroom even when the light's off, so then if the non-Jew would flick on the light, even for you, that would still only be an additional benefit. Now, I'm not sure, that's not incidentally why it's going to be allowed. It's going to be better reasons than that. This would be, again, case by case. I would not want a 5-year-old in a bathroom that they can't see in because it's, who knows what's going to be in all, right? An adult, maybe, it depends. If the bathroom has a small window, then there's no question we can run into our situation that the non-Jew turns the light on for you in the day, it's extra light. You definitely could have managed with the small window, but at night, Shalashudis time, you might not be able to use that bathroom. That's all the ways that would come into play.
What if they turn the light on for themselves?
We have not there yet. Okay, right now that's going to be the best leniency in this regard, but we're not there yet.
That's the wrong one.
Okay, that's
trying to figure all of this out right now.
right. That is going to be the best leniency, but we're not there yet, and we'll probably start with that next time. All right. So now, to sum up again, direct benefit is usher, but it has to be total. If it's indirect, it could be mutter. But again, only as long as it's indirect, it could actually change by becoming direct. Secondary benefit, you don't want to use lechatchila, but if you're in a pinch, you may rely on that. Indirect benefit is totally permissible. Okay, one last thing. Well, two last things before we get to the non-Jew doing it for himself, which we're not going to start today. We'll do that next time. When the non-Jew does a melacha for you, the extent of whom it is prohibited to depends on if it's a melacha d'oraisa or a melacha d'rabbanan. All right, so I like to,
Can you repeat that?
yes, that which we say when a non-Jew does a melacha for you, providing you a complete and direct benefit, there will be a difference if the malacha done was a malacha d'oraisa, a Torah prohibition, or a rabbinic prohibition. Okay, I like to stress at this point, although it doesn't have the same force as it does what I usually say it is. In life, you can't just listen and say, d'Rabbanan, d'oraisa, they're not killing me anyways, so what difference does it make? No, there is tons of Shabbos applications that it makes a world of difference if something is a Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition. So although we might tend to want to be mentally lazy and say, just tell me, is it us? Can I do it or not? It makes a huge difference in many scenarios. For example, as follows. You're going to ask something? No. You were going to ask something or no? No, you're good. You're good? We're good? I thought you were, okay. Okay, fine. Okay, now, when it's an Isser d'oraisa, not only is the person, the non-Jew, intended for prohibited to benefit,
I'm definitely allergic to them. Oh. So we're gonna be so. I'm so sorry.
all right,
Just 2 minutes,
less. Okay, now, what are we saying here again? Yeah, the train of thought. Yes, if it is a malacha d'oraisa, so then not only is the intended beneficiary prohibited to benefit, but all other Jews are prohibited to benefit. Whereas if it was a rabbinic prohibition, then only the Jew that the guy intended to benefit cannot benefit, but all other Jews can benefit. So to make it very practical, if you have a situation where you're not feeling well and the non-Jew sees it and puts up a urn of tea for you, that is going to be a malacha d'oraisa. Cooking the water is going to be a Torah prohibition. Therefore, not only can you not use that hot water, but someone who comes in later that has no connection to this whatsoever also can't use that water. All right, let's say you are eating a piece of chicken on Shabbos day, and the chicken is, okay, I don't want to use chicken, it's too complicated. It's something liquidy. Give me something liquidy. Soup. I don't eat soup Shabbos day. Oh, no, I can make it be still okay. I got it. It's chicken. I'm gonna just make it more extreme of a example of what the guy did, and it'll be fine. It's a piece of chicken. The chicken is cold because it's very hard to get warm chicken on Shabbos. It's out of the refrigerator. It's a cold piece of chicken. It's on your plate. You prepare to eat it because you understand you're eating a cold piece of chicken. You have non-Jewish help in your house. They feel bad for you that you are eating a cold piece of chicken. So they do you a big favor. They take the chicken and they stick it in the oven itself, which is on, okay? Or directly on the fire. Okay, now, this is where, is that a Torah prohibition or a rabbinic prohibition? So yes, you cannot put food directly onto a fire ever on Shabbos that did not come off the fire beforehand. But will it be a Torah prohibition? So if we're mentally lazy, we don't care. But if we realize that a cooked piece of chicken that was fully cooked, that was put back onto the fire itself, is not a Torah prohibition because the rule is you cannot cook something a second time. It is a rabbinic prohibition. You're never allowed to reheat directly on the fire because it looks like you're cooking, which is why you need the double, the pot on pot or whatever other things that we use, the hot plate without the dye, whatever else we heat things up with. So the non-Jew does you a favor, takes the chicken and sticks it in an oven, okay? If you're going to eat that chicken, you cannot eat it until it is fully cooled off to the point it was before, because otherwise you will be directly benefiting from the non-Jews' prohibition of cooking it. Okay, now on this point, there was a fight on a test question, which was that's only a partial benefit because you could have eaten it. It was only made warmer. Okay, it's a very smart question, but to explain the difference, which I hope the young lady was able to understand, the malacha is the cooking. As it relates to the malacha, the benefit is total. It's gone from cold to hot. We're not looking at the chicken. We're looking what the malacha did. The malacha provided a total benefit. It provided heat where there was no heat. When you turn the light on, when you have another source of light, the malacha is only providing a partial benefit. The malacha being the lighting of the fire. But the lighting of the fire, you had light. It was a partial benefit, not a complete benefit. Here, it's true you could have eaten the chicken, but the malacha of heating the chicken up was a complete benefit of that malacha. So that's why I was adamant that it was in fact a direct benefit case, not an indirect benefit case. But getting back to our point, it's only d'Rabbanan, which means if I don't want to wait the time it would take to cool down, anyone else on that table can eat that chicken warm. Now, you could not ask the non-Jew to do this, because by definition, if you ask him, whoever's asking is going to create the problem. And you can't ask for yourself and then pass it on. But if the non-Jew would have done that, then the Isser would only be to you and not anyone else at the meal, because the Isser is D'Rabbanan. And okay, similarly, and this gets into electricity. Electricity is generally viewed as a dispute if it's a Doraisa or D'Rabbanan. We hold practically, as it relates to, this might be the single most important one-line piece of information. As it relates to Amira La'akum, we view electricity as D'Rabbanan. Okay, you'll see later on that makes a big difference. Okay, therefore, anytime a non-Jew does a malacha by way of electricity, and electricity alone, it will only be prohibited to the person he did it for. Okay, now, in the case of the tea, that's why I said before, when they plug in the urn, that's one malacha, but that's not the malacha that you're benefiting from. That's just igniting the urn. The malacha is the cooking, which then is a doraisa. Okay, that being said, if the malacha is truly electric only, then it's only going to be usher for the person who was done for, not anyone else. This is useful in the modern era, because turning on a light 15 years ago, for sure, maybe even 10 years ago, was almost always a D'Rabbanan of the ignition of the electricity, and then the burning of the light bulb filament is a D'Oraisa cooking. So a light turned on would be usher not only for the person who was turned on for, but for anyone. Nowadays, almost all lights are incandescent or LED. That's not what I meant. Fluorescent or LED, not incandescent. So without getting into the science of it, although Mrs. Flora, who, if you know who that is, she was able to explain to us for about 5 minutes. She used to teach physics in Beis Yaakov, super brilliant lady. She was able to explain in very layman's terms the difference between the way an incandescent light bulb works and an LED or fluorescent. But to make a long story that was made short even shorter, it doesn't work with the burning of anything. It just works with the exciting of gases. So it's really just electricity. That means that most will hold the turning on of a light is only an Isser D'Rabbanan, which means that if you're sitting in a room and the non-Jew flicks the light on for you, you're the only one who might have a problem in that room. Everyone else could use the room because it was only an Isser D'Rabbanan, and an Isser D'Rabbanan, the direct benefit prohibition is only for the intended recipient, not anyone else. So that's just something that in general, you always have to have in your radar screen. Now, when the initial purpose was the guy himself, that changes everything. That we're going to start with next time. But here, the initial purpose was for Jew A, but since the malacha was only D'Rabbanan, even though it was a direct, complete benefit, it won't affect any other Jew. Whereas had it been an Isser D'Oraisa, it would affect every other Jew, which in the modern electrical era, we would assume a hot water urn would be the most common example of that, where even if it's done for one person, it's still going to be prohibited for everyone. Yeah.
So somebody bumps into the light switch.
Okay.
Turns the light off. It's light out.
Yes.
I'm the only one home.
Okay.
So it's sunny out. I asked somebody to turn the light on.
Okay. In the permissible way.
Right.
Okay, which we haven't got to yet, but right. So the sun goes down.
Right.
So
Shidduch time comes around. Everybody's home. The kids don't know anything
Correct.
about it.
So
they want to play a family game or something.
So if it was a incandescent light, you'd have to tell them you can't use the light because it's prohibited for them to use that light. Now, obviously, if they don't know, they're not over any Isser because they don't know. But if you were there, you probably have an obligation to alert them that they're not allowed to. If it is a fluorescent or LED, they would be allowed to use it, but you wouldn't. And therefore, you'd have to excuse yourself if you needed that light to play the game.
Okay,
but they could play because it's not usher for them, because it wasn't done for them.
okay.
Okay. Let's stop there. And then there's really one last point with the guy you benefit, and then we're going to move on to what if the non-Jew's intent wasn't only for the Jew. That we'll see, that will be the biggest leniency. Okay, that will be next time. Okay.
I have a global question. about
Yes.
teaching halakha.